Welcome to the Bangers Only podcast, where Tom Lydon and his band of experts make money talk exciting. Here's your host, Tom Lydon.
Welcome to the Bangers Only podcast. I'm Tom Lydon. Life is short. We've got to keep things simple. Use your time to focus on what's most important. That's what Bangers Only is all about. Today, I'm honored to have a good friend, Ted Merz, with us. Ted, it's great having you on the Bangers Only.
It's great to see you, Tom.
Ted, tell us about your career, because you had an incredible career at Bloomberg.
So my career at Bloomberg, I was there 32 years, which obviously is a lifetime. I had two major jobs there. I worked in the editorial group. And when I started at Bloomberg, I was the 15th news reporter hired back in 1990. And the company had been around for a few years, but was really operating like a startup. You know, very fast growth. Michael Bloomberg was right there on the floor. Very exciting. And Bloomberg News was just starting out, and it was nothing like it was going to become, like the huge operation it became.
I mean, working with Michael Bloomberg must have been incredible. I mean, back at that time, I've had the honor to meet him a couple of times. He's pretty electric.
So I'd say I worked near Michael Bloomberg rather than with Michael Bloomberg, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I was like at the bottom of the totem pole as a reporter. I fortunately got to work with him more directly much later in my career when I worked as a product manager. But initially I was a reporter, and I worked on Latin America. I became eventually New York bureau chief and then the managing editor for the Americas. And so everything to do with like business coverage, finance coverage, markets, those were the things I focused on. And then in 2006, I made a pivot. I was recruited to join the product team. So I went from working with reporters and editorial people to working with engineers building applications. And that's when I saw more of the business side. That's when I had more interactions with Mike, because he was very active and very involved in what the product looks like and how it operated and how it worked. He had a lot of opinions. And so that was a super exciting part of the career as well.
And Mike, and when I met him, he doesn't hold back. He says exactly what he feels, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I mean, obviously he's direct and he's opinionated. I think the things that stand out to me about Mike as a founder and a CEO, one, his involvement. Like, he actually comes in and uses the product every day, and he's got a view on it. He's looking for ways to improve it. So I use the metaphor, he drives the car.
Absolutely.
You know, a lot of CEOs sit and manage. They don't actually drive the car. The second thing I think that really, for me, distinguishes Mike among other leaders is he's very open to input. Now, he's a guy who's going to make the decision, and he's, very executive-like, but he's also asks your opinion. So a typical meeting with Mike, he always asks you first what you think. What would you do? What are your thoughts? So there's always that opportunity to weigh in and say, this is what I think, this is how it should work. And I think it's pretty rare, actually. I mean, I think a lot of executives just tell you what they want. But Mike is, in that respect, a good listener.
So Ted, you found yourself a couple years ago transitioning. Talk about that process and how'd you end up to where you are today?
So I left Bloomberg 3 years ago, and my position was eliminated, which was a surprise and a shock. And so I think in that way, I'm like a lot of people in their late 50s who find themselves working at a place a long time, having a certain defined career, suddenly having to reinvent themselves. And I will say that when that happened to me, I immediately looked forward. I didn't look back, and I didn't regret it. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about, well, it shouldn't have happened, or you just have to look at it like this happened. I oftentimes compare it to like getting hit by a car. Somebody's going to get hit by a car every year. It happens to be you. You don't blame the car and you don't get angry at the car. You just, you go to PT and you move on. So in my case, I think I took some time off to think about what I wanted to do differently with my life and my career and working. And what happened next was quite organic, but I think it is helpful for other people. I started writing a lot publicly and writing a lot on LinkedIn. And that was in part because vocationally I was a writer and I enjoyed that. But the surprising thing that happened was that a lot of people started DMing me, reaching out to me, and connecting with me. So it allowed and facilitated a lot of connection and conversation. I typically might write something and people would DM me and say, "Oh, that was a really interesting piece." And we'd end up either on a Zoom or possibly getting coffee. And this is the second big thing, which was I really was open to meeting a lot of people and building a new network. And I think one mistake people make when they are either let go or leave companies is they rely on their old network, the network they had from their old company. And oftentimes it's just not helpful. The people, especially if they've been in a place a long time, they don't know what's going on outside. They can't really help you with a lot of connections and leads. So you almost have to think you're not relying on your network, you're building a new network. And that's what I did. I went to a lot of events. I kind of said yes to everything, every opportunity if something came up. There are a lot of events that are posted on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and you can just go. You don't have to. There's no formal invitation, and they're sort of pretty casual. And so I set about rebuilding or building a new network. I particularly focused in the founder venture capital startup arena. I just found that intellectually interesting. I found it very different because I had mostly worked around and with bulge bracket big financial firms. So I wanted something like a completely different feel. And I think I found the fintech founder community was just a very big departure for me from a Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan kind of view of the world. I found it a place I could learn a lot. So those two big things are how I really went forward.
Yeah. And you had a new network, you built a new network. It was in an area that you hadn't been exposed to before. You can tell just by the way you write and your enthusiasm that you were thriving, but also you started writing about things that weren't necessarily business oriented. And that helped you connect with people too. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most surprising things. And this was not intentional or strategic or anything. What happened was after I left Bloomberg, I had the freedom to post and write about anything I wanted. And I discovered that there were a couple of things that interested me. I was interested in fintech. I was interested in kind of the career lessons from my career at Bloomberg. And then organically, I started writing about my parents, particularly my father, who is a greatest generation World War II vet who has lots of great kind of life hacks is what we'd call them, but he has all this wit and wisdom. And I started putting that out there because I found it interesting. There were things in many cases I just never asked him. So I started telling stories about my dad. And I think it was because I didn't work anywhere and didn't think about it. I just posted them. I said, people don't like them. That's fine. And it turned out a lot of people like them.
What type of reactions did you get in writing about your dad?
Really great. I mean, I think it really hit a nerve for a lot of people. My father's emblematic of the greatest generation that is largely disappearing, and a sort of a life experience of going through the Great Depression, World War II, the Vietnam War. So there's all this history that for many people today it seems like a long time ago. And writing about some of those experiences and that history struck, I think, a bit of a nostalgic chord, but also it seemed, incredibly wise and people were very interested in it. In some cases, it reminded them of their own parents or their grandparents. And in some cases, they were just like, wow, I didn't even know anything about those events or that history. So it really resonated. And I'll tell you, Tom, probably the craziest and most strange thing was I ultimately started getting business offers, like inquiry. People started DMing me and calling me to help them write their stories about business. But what they saw was that the stories about my dad were so evocative and interesting. I think the thinking was, if he can write about that, he can certainly write about my B2B startup or something. I don't know, but they weren't directly related in the sense. So writing about stories that were not business related also really brought people in.
Did you feel that because you shared these personal stories that you had a greater connection with people from a business standpoint?
I think that is what happened. Yeah. They they feel, there's a connection. Again, I think the connection sometimes is I'd write a story about something my father did, and someone will say their dad did the same thing. So you build that connection. I don't think it was expected on my part. I wasn't writing to do that. But it happens. And I think the broader lesson there is when you share your life experience and the things you've gone through and the things you experience, particularly because of the way social media amplifies it, you can find people all over the world who've had similar life experiences and similar views. And that can help you connect with them in a deeper way.
Yeah.
I think that's what's quite new here. And we just didn't have that 15, 20 years ago.
It's great. And we want to get back to your dad in a minute, but I want to talk about your company that you launched called Principles Media, where you're actually working with companies, some startups, some fintech companies, some early Series A companies. But talk about that introduction to try to get executives to put themselves out there in a different way, because we know traditionally from a executive standpoint, communication will tend to be in writing about the company, or maybe it's an earnings call, or maybe it's a PowerPoint deck, but you're getting these executives to kind of open up a little bit more. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think the best way to think about it, I think when people think about it as doing social media, they get a little confused, maybe frightened. It's mysterious. I think the best way for CEOs to understand what's happening is that we're seeing this complete sea change in communications. Okay. So if you start with the premise that the CEO's job or any executive's job is to communicate with their stakeholders, to reach out and connect with people, that's the job, right? That's a big part of the job anyway.
Yeah.
Historically, we had a way to do that, which was you would hire a PR firm. The PR firm would connect you with the New York Times or Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal and reporters. And those people would you would be interviewed and they'd write your story. And that playbook has been going on for 75 years. Okay. So people are very accustomed to it. They know how it works. When they have an announcement, they go on CNBC, they get interviewed by the Wall Street Journal and so forth. What we're seeing now, though, is that reliance on a gatekeeper like the media is no longer necessary because you can directly communicate with your stakeholders. The thing is, you use social media to do that. So people who are over 50, who were not digital natives when they grew up, who are not accustomed to posting a lot online, for them, this is a very uncomfortable, disorientating process. If you're under 30, this seems like the most normal thing in the world, okay? But most CEOs, particularly in the S&P 500, tend to be over 60, and they have in their mind a way that information is communicated. And it is, as I said, I do an interview with somebody on CNBC or Bloomberg, and that's how it gets out.
So you have to change their mindset, right?
No, I think this is a generational shift.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. There is no question in my mind that if you look out 5 or 10 years, everybody who's in an executive position will regard the need to communicate with their stakeholders, and this will be an integral part of writing online and doing video online.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing bits of this from the old guard. We see John Gray at Blackstone, the CEO, is kind of famous now for doing these videos where he goes running and he talks about what's going on in his life and business. We saw Mark Zuckerberg make every major product announcement via video in the last year. There's other people. Rich Henler writes a lot. He's the CEO of Jefferies. He writes a lot on Instagram. But by and large, most CEOs regard they regard social media kind of as a waste of time and not something they need to be running the company. What I am 100% convinced of is that they will regard in the future a key part of running in the company as getting their message and story out to as many people as possible. And that's going to mean basically posting or creating content via social media. So my company tries to help them. And I think for the older people, it's like I help them tell their stories, find their stories. I reassure them that it's not going to go badly. I also think it's a very different kind of communication. You talked about me writing about my dad. To some degree, the expectations on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, are very different than going on a CNBC interview. And what the content that works and communicates with people is very different. So that's why I think a company like mine exists, because it's a new field. It's not been done basically before. You can't write a press release style post, put it on social media, and expect anyone to read it. That's kind of the big. We know this intuitively, but it's still something that people experience. You have to write that story differently, and it's got to be written in a way that's
hard to change,
compelling.
especially for people who've been at it for a while. I'll tell you a story. Just today, I get a call from an ETF company. I've known them for a while. They specialized in a certain strategy, and they say, we want to spend more money marketing. We got to get the word out there. We've got some great ETFs and nobody knows about it. What should we do? So I immediately go on LinkedIn and I look at the CEO, at the CEO's profile.
Yeah.
It has the logo of the company, and in the picture, it's blank. There's not even a picture.
Wow,
right?
Really?
Not even a picture. And I said, I know your CEO, he's not shy. No. He needs to get out there. And I said, I've got the guy for him. So
well, hopefully it's me.
that's
hopefully.
you.
But
he has to unlearn the way things are done, because traditionally they've done a lot of different things. But you have to open up. You have to be personal, and I'm going to connect you to. But I said, I could tell you where you could advertise. You could put money on CNBC. You could do webcasts and try to tackle the advisor community. I said, but until you're willing to be personal and get to know the people that potentially could be shareholders, you're not going to be successful.
I think this is a really interesting thing. You and I have been in this business a long time. So we've also seen the arc of change here.
Yeah.
And one of the things I explain to people who are trying to understand what's happening is, back in the 90s, CEOs were not typically on the earnings conference call. That was delegated to the CFO.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if you're not on that call, it's regarded as a dereliction of duty. You have to be there. CEOs in the 90s didn't do product launches. I mean, Steve Jobs kind of changed that. But so there's an evolution of the CEO or executives in general becoming more visible to stakeholders, first to analysts, then investors, then the general public. And one of the things that people have a hard time getting their head around is, particularly companies, is they want to promote the company and the brand. And I mean, I understand that, but the reality is, in the modern media landscape, people connect with people. And so you can't get me to watch or read something about Honeywell. There's no way. But if the CEO of Honeywell gets on and he has a video and it's compelling and it's interesting and it's a good story, I will watch that.
Yeah. So you've been successful actually helping some executives make this transition. Tell me a little bit about the feedback that you've gotten from them after they've actually produced a video or done something personal and shared that via social media.
So there's a lot of stories, but one in particular stands out for me. A person I worked for is a doctor and has a startup and runs a telehealth business. And when they started writing on LinkedIn, they started getting local television stations would see their writing and they call them to do interviews, to basically do a piece on that take. And to me, that is the ultimate example of what's changed in media. So in the past, he would have called the station and tried to get on air, and they probably would have said no. What's happening today is he writes his story online. It's a great story. It's easy to recognize. It's the TV producer can see that it can be produced, and they call him and do a segment on him. And next thing you know, he's now like done a few media hits and media that he would not have done otherwise.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting that way. I mean, I think that's the whole change too in landscape is you're going to post your story and people will discover you, both the media as well as investors and other people.
Ted, you get them to put themselves out there where maybe they wouldn't normally feel comfortable doing that. Do people who read that reciprocate?
Yeah, I find that I have personally experienced that. So I've written a couple of pieces about getting let go at Bloomberg, and there's a lot of comments that resonates tremendously with a lot of people who've had that same experience, and they post online for everyone. But then I also get a tremendous number of DMs privately from people saying, "Well, thank you for writing that story," or "Let's connect." Or so the right story can strike a chord. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about here is like, but that's the thing. I mean, I think the key thing is that a lot of executives see social media as not being as important as I know it is and is becoming more so. When they do recognize it, they have a reticence to really tell a story about their business or their life. And they make it very, very toned down or corporate or boring. And then it's not going to resonate. It's not going to affect people. So that's the challenge, is striking that right balance of providing information, something that people will get excited about and interested to read.
Well, I have to say, after being at Bloomberg for 3 decades and actually having the courage to share that and what you went through, you're opening up and you're sharing not just to people, your family and friends, but to everybody. And there are a lot of people who probably really, really appreciate that, probably at a difficult time in their lives, and you giving them encouragement to start something. So like with the company that you have right now, you're helping many companies right now, but they're having to change the way they go about it. And I'm sensing through some of the stories you've shared with me, not only is it successful, but the CEOs are actually enjoying something that they never thought they'd enjoy before.
Yeah, I mean, it facilitates connection. There's no question. And, that's something a lot of executives struggle with. How do they keep connected with, their employees, their investors, all sorts of people? And so this is, I think, one of the things, and one reason it'll become more and more common is because it's so easy and effective a way to communicate and keep people informed on like what you're thinking and what you're doing.
Yeah. So you are strategic too about what you write about. You write about some personal things, but also most people know you as the ex-Bloomberg guy.
Yeah.
They know a little bit about what you do personally. They definitely love hearing about your dad. Are you strategic about what you do write about and what you don't write about? And regarding your personal brand, is that all part of it?
So the way I think about that, and it is, I think we all have many passions and interests and hobbies. We're many people, effectively. I think anything you share online should be true and be who you are. But you can't share everything online for a variety of reasons. And one reason strategically, and we're talking about business here, is that sometimes it's just too much to absorb. You can't be everything to everybody, so you make some decisions. And I think this is not any different than in real life. Okay. If you draw an analogy, like I write about like 4 things online. I write about my dad. I write about my Bloomberg days. I write about fintech, and I write about founders and startups. Those are the things that interest me the most right now. I was telling you earlier, I'm also interested in kayaking. I like to kayak. But it's like there comes a point where you can't write about everything you do because you have to prioritize. First of all, there's a time question. But I think from a strategic point of view, too, is like you just can't be a million things. People have to understand you as something. And you have to repeat to build your, if you know, to a certain point, I prioritize the things I want to connect with people on. And I think the powerful way to understand that is that you become what you write, and you become what you write. So if I wrote about only kayaking, I would become the kayaking guy. That's the way I like to put that.
Yeah.
And you have to give that. I could become the kayaking.
But you don't want to be the kayaking.
You don't want that. It's not helpful to the business, and it's not even like that big a part of my life, right? So, I think it mirrors that. But I think it's an important thing that sometimes people don't realize, because sometimes people are undisciplined about posting online, and they think there's no consequence, and there is a consequence, and the consequence is that people get confused who you are. Right. But it's sort of like if you wear a polo shirt and khakis every day to the office, that's who you become. And if you wore a completely different wardrobe every day, people would be like, what is going on with that guy? So I don't think it's bad. I just think you have to make some choices about what you want to focus on, because you become that. And also, more importantly, you attract that. So I'm really interested in founders in fintech right now. And if I write a lot about it, that's the inbound I get. And that's what people associate me with. And that's great. That's what I want. I mean, that's why you make that choice.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a bit of a personal connection.
Yes.
We're sitting here in Manasquan, New Jersey. I am, and my wife's family has had a place across the street for 55 years, and we're fortunate enough to buy a place during COVID. And lo and behold, you and I get connected through mutual friends. And tell the story.
Well, we met, I believe, in San Diego, right? Is that we were out at a venture capital event organized by our mutual friend Howard Winson. And we met and we're talking, and I think it was something like, where do you live? And it was like, New Jersey. Where in New Jersey, And it just went all the way down from the county to the town to the street. And it turns out that you live just a block from my parents, which is crazy. So that was really small world phenomenon, and it was great to, then when I was down and seeing them, we connected down there on the beach. So that's,
and you've been down here since you were a little kid yourself, right?
Yeah. I've been there my whole life. So, basically, I think they bought the house when I was 2 or something. Yeah. So 58 years or so.
And what I love about your folks is they have a deep love for this town, Manasquan, through their walls in their house of the old aerial shots of what this beach community used to look like and how it's evolved. And your dad, God bless him, 98 years old, is really with it still. I mean, he's sharp as a tack, and he and your mom love talking about the history and all. Share briefly, if you would, about his collection.
Yeah. So this is thanks to you, but my father has been collecting beach badges from when they bought the house, or even before, because they were going down before they bought the house. So I think his collection goes back to 1962 or so. And he wanted to organize it. So I went down and we organized the beach badge collection. So there's badges from Manasquan Beach every year back to 62. And in the process of that, somehow we discovered that there were 3 years that were missing. And this is, I wrote about that. I put it on LinkedIn, and I guess you read it and you're like, I'm going to solve that problem. So I
wasn't the only one, Ted. There were
there were like a bunch of people who read that piece, and they said they're going to solve that problem. And they got together and found the badges from those 3 years and delivered them to my father, which absolutely made his day. So that is such a good story. I love it. And it's also, I mean, one thing when I think about social media and being online, I think people sometimes think that it's like, away from the real world. And for me, it's the opposite. It's like connects you with the real world, because it connected you and I, and connected me with the other neighbors who got the badges. And I think that's an amazing thing, and underappreciated in some ways.
Well, it's not just thrilling to have you around, but have your parents around, and to continue every time we see you to hear more stories about this wonderful little town. Okay, this has been awesome. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way to find you?
Probably the best way is on LinkedIn. Just DM me on LinkedIn is easy. You can look up my website, Principles Media, but I'm fairly chronically online and easy to find.
Yeah, and your little short videos it's almost one a day, and they're gold, and and I love the fact that you're shooting them here from the Jersey Shore, and every one I always get a little bit of something from it. So thank you for that, and thanks for grabbing some time with me today.
I appreciate it, Tom. I'll tell you, I started doing video 3 weeks ago, so it's like making it up, but I figure if I can do it, anybody can do it. So
yeah, don't slow down. Keep doing it.
Okay.
All right, Ted, thank you so much.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results.